Dean Fachon joins us this time around on Author's Corner here on America Tonight with me, Kate Delaney. The name of his book, DIPG, Eternal Hope versus Terminal Corruption. Oh, his story is one that just pulls right at your heartstrings. Neil, his 19-year-old son, an engineering student who was doing so well at Northeastern University, to Mass General Hospital, and there they were told by the doctors that he had 3 months to live. We're going to talk about that story and the things that have happened since then. So, Dean, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Let's talk about DIPG for people who don't know what it is.
Sure. It stands for diffuse intrinsic pontine glioma. That's a very rare, generally pediatric brain cancer that basically lodges itself in the brain stem, and it gets intertwined with healthy neurons. So it's not something that's like a lump that can be extracted surgically. It just basically sets up house like spaghetti and sauce. And over time, it'll separate the neurons. As it grows, it begins to separate the spacing between the neurons until the signals that they're sending become increasingly degraded, and it causes a cascading set of symptoms, which ultimately end in the patient's bodily functions coming to a halt.
Wow. And take us back to the day that I mentioned, how here he is, he's this bright young guy full of life, and this happens, and then you get on this journey of understanding what it is and getting the treatment, which ended up being so awful, and trying to figure out what was right and what wasn't being, what you weren't being told and what wasn't happening. Take us through that story.
Well, we were actually empty nesters, starting to plan maybe moving to a smaller house and all that sort of stuff. And we got a phone call from my son, and he said, "You guys were right to be worried about me. I have a brain tumor." And that obviously took us for a complete loop. And we said we'd join him for his meeting with the oncologist, which was going to happen very promptly. And in the meeting with the oncologist, we said, looked at the slices that they show of his MRI, and finally come to the one that shows this big white ball about the size of a golf ball. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, that's the sucker that's got to be surgically taken out. It wasn't until later that we were told, no, this is DIPG. You don't get to take it out. It's kind of lodged there. And that's when we were told 3 months to live. That's the only time in the entire duration of Neil's journey that he actually really succumbed to some depression. He put his hands in his head in his hands, and basically said, "I'm screwed." But after that, we sort of started buckling down, tried to figure out what are we going to do. Offering from Mass General basically started with radiation. Get an extra 3 months of radiation, and Neil almost immediately wasn't particularly interested in radiation because it was not buying a lot of time, and radiation carries with it the risk of developing another cancer. So he was kind of set against that. There were other options that were offered. Ultimately, we started looking outside the box for clinical trials and things like that. I had heard of Dr. Stanislav Berzinski years before, when my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and was looking for outside-the-box treatments for her. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of information available about him, and some of it is very positive. There's some very good documentary type pieces that have been put together by Eric Marola. But the information online that you see about him is sheer quackery. Stay away. It was a major stonewall of complete Brzezinski is a charlatan sort of thing. So that was a difficult hurdle to get over. We had to really dig deep. It wasn't until, we continued entertaining that, but we found other things to do as well. But when my daughter was also a Northeastern student, ironically, was actively involved in looking for what we could do. She actually met on social media, or through social media, a survivor of DIPG who was treated at the Brzezinski Clinic, and the survivor, Celeste Sabah, was very happy to speak with Neil. So they arranged to have a Facebook, whatever that, maybe it was a Zoom meeting back then, I'm not sure. But they chatted for about a half an hour, just Evie and Neil and Celeste. And when he came downstairs from that, he was just practically bouncing off the ceiling. He was so high on the idea, I want to go see Brzezinski. I really want to go see Brzezinski. And so that really cemented the idea that that was the track we wanted to take with the anti-neoplaston therapy, which is basically a peptide therapy, which Brzezinski had discovered back in the 70s, I believe, that many cancer patients that he was trying to treat were lacking in certain simple peptides. And he wondered if he replaced those peptides, what that might do. And he found initially he was a rising star and received a lot of big media attention for this peptide treatment, anti-neoplastons. But then it's a long story unto itself as to how he fell afoul of things and fell into disfavor. But he was still able to soldier on, and he had a clinical trial that was available at the time that Neil was sick, and it was also a clinical trial available that did not require radiation. And almost every other clinical trial that Neil looked at, some of them sounded very exciting, immunotherapy and whatnot, but they all required some form of radiation. And he was just like dead set against that. So that helped again further to want to go to Brzezinski. Then again, this is an FDA-approved trial that he ended up enrolling in at the Brzezinski Clinic. And it was only after he had started treatment that the FDA decided, no, actually, we don't want this clinical trial to go ahead. We're going to put a full hold on it. And that landed us in federal court to get an injunction and a lot of anxiety and ill will, unfortunately. But trying to get past that at this point. But more to the why Neil's story is so important, I think today is because while Neil had a very rare disease, what happened to him is not rare at all today. In the wake of the COVID pandemic and the experimental shots that were given, everyone knows somebody who has seen a rise. I mean, everyone knows somebody who has experienced the turbo cancer or some sort of a heart problem or a neural problem that's life challenging, if not life threatening. And we firmly believe that Neil's illness was sparked by having been administered a couple of vaccines, one of them being HPV, which prior to COVID was the most deadly vaccine ever created. If you look at the VAERS system, it was more injuries and problems caused by the HPV vaccine than all other vaccines combined to that point. Well, after the COVID vaccines came out, that became the king, and you had to combine all the others, and still the injury and harm caused by the COVID vaccine documented on VAERS, which is ostensibly 1 to 10% capture of what's actually happening in the world. It was the worst vaccine ever created. And so this story is something that for people who are stuck in the situation, it could give them ideas about ways of trying to navigate the medical system and some of the things they're going to come up against so that they're prepared for it and can bull through them more quickly. And then for people who are fortunate enough to not have been thrust into a situation like this, but probably know someone who has, this will give them a lot greater sense of what it is they are going through.
Yeah, I'll tell you, reading the book, I feel like I know Neil and your journey because you were so incredibly granular. You're so meticulous with the documents and the details and the emails and the medical reports. And you do that on purpose. I mean, it would be a good resource for so many people, including medical students, but also, as you just mentioned, people going through a journey with their healthcare in any way, with some of the things that there's definitely pushback on. And so you took some time to put this all together, didn't you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it started out as just trying to concatenate all the information I had chronologically, and I had to go back and supply death certificates to various hospitals and institutions in order to acquire the reports. But I wanted it to be as factually based as it possibly could, so someone couldn't just say, well, this is a bereaved father, and remembering it this way. I mean, these are the dots that are in the sand that are indelible in terms of the steps we took. And so, yeah, it took me a long time. I stumbled many times just because it's a heartrending thing, and I had something else I've been trying to accomplish, and I was torn between the two for a while. That's the grand illusion thing that's actually referred to on the back cover of the book. But at least I finally did get this out. It's only part one of what I hope will someday be a 3-part series, but I don't. We'll see if I have the juice to do the remainder of it. But this is really the critical part that I felt needed to get out now.
And we'll be back with more of Dean Fachon.